We'll call to order the Wenham Finance Appointment Committee, which is made up of Chairman of the Select Board, Catherine Harrison, Mr. Roger Smerridge, who is moderator, and myself, Jim Purdy, who is Chair of the Finance Committee. First order of business is to review the minutes from July 10th. I have read them. I found them accurate. Are there any comments or questions before we approve the minutes? From Roger or Catherine?
I just had one suggestion for wording change, but to try to match it to the actual wording in the document, but I forgot to look it up. But in the last paragraph where we talk about how the Finance Committee may not miss a specific number of meetings before they must resign, I think we actually spoke about it in the term in more specific terms. I could be wrong. I think this is fine, but I think we said they could not miss more than 5 meetings before they would be vacated. But that just might be what's in my head. So if nobody else remembers it that way, I think this.
Well, I recall talking about it, but frankly, I haven't looked at the bylaws to see what the exact number of
and that
missed meetings.
That could be my problem. Just okay, then I'm fine with them the way they are. Thank you, Catherine.
Roger.
I just have one comment on the minutes from the June 3rd, 2021 meeting, but if we're taking them in order, I'll hold that.
We only had one meeting.
Sorry, I was.
Oh, there in the email that Jackie had sent, there was a slate of minutes from the prior iteration of the committee. Wasn't clear to me whether that still needed to be approved.
I think that was an example of an appointment committee of a year ago.
Okay.
That wasn't a committee meeting that this particular group has had.
Right. I didn't know if it was a carryover that we were.
Right. No.
Yeah. So on the June 3rd, 2021 meeting minutes, there was just an asterisk next to the word town moderator, which asterisk didn't appear to relate to anything. It looks like it might have been a carryover from a prior draft. So that just, I think, needs to come out.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the July 10th appointment committee meeting minutes with those corrections?
I'll make a motion, but I have June 3rd. Was it minutes of June 3rd meeting? Yeah.
Oh,
so
I
I moved
thought it was June 10th. I'm sorry. When was our last meeting? Was it June 3rd or June 10th?
My notes show June 3rd.
Mine too.
Okay.
Did we meet on June? Oh, we're good. We're starting off great here tonight.
My mistake. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't see a meeting on the 10th. So the motion would be that the Finance Advisory Appointing Committee approve the minutes of the meeting June 3rd, 2021 with the discussed amendments.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of the minutes as stated, any other comments or questions before we vote? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye, Jim.
Aye, Roger.
Hi, Catherine.
Aye, Catherine. Aye, Roger. Those are unanimously approved, Catherine T. Okay, I think the next order of business that we have before we bring on the candidates is to discuss the potential of the questions. Is that, I think, our next kind of point of discussion? So I sent out a list of potentially 10 questions. Catherine, you got back to me stating that it's going to be hard to ask 10 questions, which I concur, within 20 minutes or so.
Right. So my suggestion was that we maybe prioritize at least the first 5 or 6 so that, you know,
Right.
we just ask them in order. I did have one, if I may, that I don't think we should include.
I
Just
have,
one.
I crossed out 3 actually.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Go
well,
ahead.
okay. You go first then, Jim.
So I thought, you know, that question 3, question 4, and question 5 would likely come up in the overall introductory statements by the candidates.
Okay.
And actually, question 1 and 2 could be combined.
Yeah, there would be of equal priority to me anyway.
I had a question mark about the understanding of the school budget. However, I think that's pretty important given the dynamics of the school budget within our overall impact on our town operating budget.
I think there should be something in there about the school budget.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to ignore.
Yeah. I think their understanding of budgetary challenges for the community, roles and responsibilities of finance would be important to discuss. I think potential conflict of interest, I would like to keep that in there.
Okay, we may have to respectfully disagree on that. That
Okay.
was one of the ones that I took out because I think that
Okay.
anyone in a small town and any board could have a transitory conflict of interest or a conflict of interest in one particular thing. And for me anyway, I don't think I would exclude someone because they couldn't vote on one particular issue. I mean,
I wouldn't either.
so I'm not sure. I thought that was necessarily I don't know, fair question, but an important question maybe.
Okay.
Roger, you want to be the tiebreaker on that? I don't feel that strongly about it.
I think it's in the sense of what we're trying to get from the interested candidates, it might be lower on the priority list, but I don't think there's necessarily a harm in asking the questions to see how the candidates would handle themselves when presented with that situation. But I also don't feel strongly one way or the other.
Well, let me be frank. Let me be, David, I think is in a unique situation. Correct me if my perception is off base, with his wife as the town clerk. So the town clerk is part of our annual budget negotiations, development. I just saw that as a potential area that he might want to address publicly.
Yes, that's true. I think it's easily addressed publicly. And we've seen it before. I feel like I actually thought there was potential conflicts of interest that could happen in 2 different people, but I felt like that's sort of singling out a candidate to have them, if we're perceiving this as a potential problem, it's singling out a candidate and asking to highlight what is potentially a problem. I mean, Kirsten has been working for the town of Hamilton. Is that a conflict of interest? Maybe, maybe not. But if it is, I don't think it would preclude me from, I'd want her to address it, but I would, just like I would want David to address it when the time came.
So your take on it is people will be aware of these areas of potential or perceived conflicts and that they would voluntarily raise their management of those issues.
Well, I guess 2 things on that, and partly because of some work that we're hoping to do on the select board. I'm hoping that we'll have a code of conduct for every board and committee member, and that
Okay.
at the first meeting of every year, so that will, the conversation will come up, and part of that conversation will be if you perceive any, you know, conflicts. But that if we don't end up with that in a code of conduct, I think that's a question that is better asked on the committee, because nobody has a conflict that would preclude them from being on it.
No,
So
that's right.
your first meeting, you might want to say, hey, for new members,
Yeah.
if there's a potential conflict. Anyway, I
Okay.
don't feel that strongly about it. I think there are
Okay.
other,
All right, so
to
we can,
Roger's point.
we can hold off on that question. That's fine. How do you want to proceed with the asking of the questions? You want to take turns?
I have no preference. Whatever you'd like to do, Jim.
So why don't I start off with the first question?
Okay.
And then Catherine, you ask a question, Roger, and then we'll rotate back again. Is that okay? Something like that?
Sure. And are we going to just go then in order of the questions, or
That's
we're
my thought. But
are we going to not, your suggestion was to not include 3, 4, and 5?
not at this point.
Okay, so we go 1, 2, and then 6.
1, 2, then go to 6, 7, and 8,
Okay,
9, and scratch 10.
okay. Okay,
Is that okay, Roger?
Yes, I had printed out a different set of the questions, and I'm just trying to get it
Okay.
in front of me. So, but yeah, I think that sounds fine.
Okay.
Of a way of proceeding.
do you have it, Roger? Because I can email.
Yeah, no, I have it. I had just printed off something. I had printed off the finance director example questions rather than the list. So I'm just, give me 2 seconds to just print off the correct list, so I'm not having to look at my iPhone
Yes.
and do one of these.
I was having a conversation today where I think ideally it takes 3 screens to chair
Well,
a Zoom meeting anyway.
I'm in my office, so I do actually have 3
There
screens,
you go.
but I
have
yeah,
one
in front of
screen
me.
and an iPad.
Yeah.
And that's the way I usually do it too. I have my iPad and my computer.
All right, well, this is not printing, so I am going to use my multiple screens to my benefit. So, all right.
Okay, so once the first candidate comes on, I'll welcome them, introduce the committee, and briefly introduce the process, and then begin with the questions.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And thank
are we
you.
understanding that they're going to come in one at a time at the
Yeah.
time that so they're
That's
not going
my
to all be in
understanding.
together?
At the
Okay.
times that they have.
Okay.
And the first candidate is in the waiting room as well as one of the other candidates.
Okay, so David's in the waiting room. He's first, is my understanding.
Yes. So if we're ready to proceed, I'll let him in.
Are we ready to go?
I'm ready whenever you're ready.
Very good. Thank you, Roger.
All right, here we go.
Good evening, David. You on audio? David?
Just,
You're on, your audio's on, off.
is this a situation where,
There we
oh,
go.
there he
you
is.
go.
Hey,
Thank
Dave,
you.
how are you?
Good.
Hi, David. Welcome.
Thank
Welcome.
you. In today's
So,
world of
David,
stuff.
you're the first candidate that we're interviewing this evening.
Okay.
And what we'll do is that we will ask a few questions. The committee is made up of Catherine Harrison, Chair of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Roger Smerridge, moderator, and myself. So we have a series of several questions. We'll take about 20 minutes or so, and then end the conversation and go on to the other 2 candidates, of which there's 3 for 2 positions.
That's
And then
fine.
later on this evening, open to the public, will be our discussion about the 3 candidates.
Good.
Okay?
Yep.
So the first question is one of those open-ended questions you get in a lot of interviews. Tell us about your experiences, about yourself, your work experiences, your history in the town that you feel may contribute to the operations of the Finance Committee, Dave.
Okay, just kind of as a quick personal side, I've actually been associated with the town since about 1964, when I moved here as a 5-year-old with the family, went through the school system, and actually came back and bought my family's house in 93, and my mother and grandmother lived with us until they passed. So we've kind of been associated now for almost 6 decades with the town. And my father was a police officer in town for over 20 years. My mother was a police matron. And Trudy was involved, my wife, Trudy, was involved in the COA, town clerk now. So I've had a lot of connections to the town besides just living here. I also previously served on the Blue Ribbon Committee when we were doing some of the school studies. So I've kind of, and again, in the background behind Trudy, I've always helped her in the budgets and in the vote counts and different things like that. So I kind of used my skill sets to kind of always had fingers in the town, although not directly. From a business side, my professional side, I actually started out life as a chemical engineer. So I was a techie, kind of moved through the research and development world into manufacturing, then out into the field, went into sales, went into marketing, strategic acquisitions, and I've been in operations for basically the past 10 to 15 years. So I'm now presently a director of operations for a $250 million portion of Osram. Osram is a $4 billion global company. And as I said, I'm director of operations for the business here in North America. So with that portion of my business, we call it business background, this is most relevant. I actually have people that operate on the sales and marketing side, demand planning, supply planning, purchasing, manufacturing, distribution and stuff. So I'm kind of an overall operations side. And I work with our finance group to make sure that kind of the operations and the books and balances and what I think would be similar to the role of the finance committee, kind of gather all the information in from the different groups to help develop a comprehensive plan that's balancing, and again, in the commercial world, I'm balancing revenue against expenses so that we make a profit. And in the town, I realize it's balancing revenue versus expenses to keep the taxes in a palatable point for the citizens. And from what I've read up, and again, from dealing with people in town, I see the role of the finance committee is to help gather all that information. And I think I've heard some people refer to it as kind of the House Ways and Means Committee for the town that balances out the department, the budgets that they develop or want to develop, and then also balance it against the needs of the town people, the taxpayers, and help to put that together as a plan so that it's, again, understandable by the taxpayers who have to vote on it and approve it, that it also allows the departments to actually execute and provide the services that they're supposed to, and present that to the town and bring it to the town meeting for that purpose. So from a background perspective, I think a lot of what I do for a business and my data and analytical skills is what would help me in that fashion. So kind of that oversight role, not actually being the departments, but having the ability to pull it together and help other people, because like I have to present to our CFO and our CEO to make sure that they approve of where the business is heading. And I think that's kind of what the finance committee I've always watched do, is they help pull it together for the town so the townspeople know where we're going.
Just quickly, Dave, I also meant to ask you, what's piqued your interest in joining the Finance Committee at this point in time?
Well, it's actually kind of a combination of things where I see the town is again facing some big challenges ahead, where I know your group worked very hard this year to keep it online, but I see that that's going to get tougher. And also from a personal perspective, I'm in the process actually right now as a business where winding things down, and I'm actually in part of the mergers and acquisition process. We're selling off parts of the company. So I actually have wanted to do things before, but haven't had the time, and I won't make a commitment unless I can put in the time. And actually from a personal perspective, this is a year that that's changing. So it's kind of, I look at it as I've always wanted to try to help the town and have in the background, and I'm kind of like the special committee of the Blue Ribbon, but I haven't had the bandwidth to fully get into the finance committee, or, people have asked me to go for selectman before, but I'm now coming to the point where I have time to be able to kind of put the effort towards the town without, again, I don't want to make a commitment if I can't live up to it.
Thanks, David. Catherine?
So can I use a little, I'm supposed to ask you the next question, but you said something that I just would like, if you don't mind, Jim, I just
Oh,
like
sure.
Dave
Of course.
to define. You mentioned your work on the Blue Ribbon Committee. I'm not sure everyone in this group knows what that is. Could you
Okay.
just define that a little bit? Because it's an interesting experience and I think people would be useful for.
Yeah, so several years ago, when we were having some budget issues and we're trying to balance things out, Hamilton and Wenham put together a Blue Ribbon Commission or committee, and it was to look at the school budgets and start doing more in-depth analysis. And my position was the vice chair, but I also became the data analytics person on the committee. So we were getting input from the schools, but also the Department of Education took an interest in what we were doing, and they assigned a person from Boston to me who allowed me to have access to all of the other school systems information. And I actually developed a model that allowed us to look at how we spend money as the school systems and what areas and things. And I built a model to compare ourselves to our cohort districts by, again, gathering information with the assistance from the state person. And it allowed us to start focusing the discussions, because again, we always have the school budget discussion, but this was a way to remove the rhetoric and turn it into more of a comparative mathematical, like you would do in business, benchmarking exercise. And kind of what was interesting about it is, to me, it was kind of what I did for work, the data analytics and stuff. The state got interested in it. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, if you go online now, the Department of Education has what they call the DART tool, a DART tool, that they based upon the original model I developed back, Blue Ribbon Commission. So it was kind of, even for the state, it was one of the first times they started using data analytics, which I think, again, is as we go forward, information analysis and a lot of that stuff is what I think the town's faced with as we get into, things are tighter and tighter, and it's not like we've got this endless revenue source coming at us. So.
Thank you. I guess I'll cede that as the second question and catch up in the third round. I don't want to get us behind, but so I can either ask another question or can skip me, Jim. If you
Why
think
don't
that
you
was
go on to the question that you're going to ask, and then we'll go to Roger's question.
okay. So the next question that we have on the list is, could you please share with us your current understanding of the town operating budget and what you perceive to be our primary budgetary challenges?
Well, from, again, this year's meetings, I know we're in that $22 million range, and we've got about 60% of it coming through the schools. And I think that's not a strange way to say it, there isn't a spot in the budget that's excessive or has a lot of room. So I think we're kind of approaching that point of this year's budget process kind of showed that we had to look at every individual area very closely for the services we're supplying and the cost for it. And I think that's going to be the ongoing challenge now, is it's not like we're looking for large areas of fat to cut to be able to balance, or large new revenue sources coming in. So I think the challenge is kind of closely identifying the true revenue sources we have and being able to adapt across all the departments. Because I don't think it's really, we have a school issue or we have a police department issue. It's kind of all over. We have to start looking at it, because I don't think there's an elephant in the room from what I've seen.
Thank you.
Roger?
How do you perceive the role and responsibilities of the finance committee within the overall town government structure?
from what I personally see and what I've also read up on, it is its role, by statutory, it's to pull together and bring the budget to the town meeting. So I look at it as the, call it the collection point, like like the House Ways and Means Committee would be, that gathers all the information in, works with all the different departments, and looks at the balances and where things need to be addressed, and works with the departments to be able to bring forward to town meeting a budget that's palatable, that the townspeople can work with, and or bring forward choices that they have to make. Because I think we're coming into that mode of the townspeople need to be able to make choices. So I look at the role of the Finance Committee as the gathering point to bring in the selectmen's views, the individual department views, balancing it against the taxpayers' views and the revenue sources, and present that plan at town meeting in a fashion that the townspeople can make their choice. Again, working ahead of that. And I think that's really where we now start to need to maybe do more of, because I know we've done things like this in the past, getting townspeople's input early on and trying to make sure that we're messaging early so that it's not we don't wait for the town meeting for the last minute surprise. So I think that's, to me, the role of the Finance Committee is the gather of all the information, balancing it out, and then presenting that, call it balanced plan, to the town for their approval.
Thank you, David. Given your past role on the school committee, with that Blue Ribbon Committee, could you discuss your perception and understanding of the school budget, and how the school budget interfaces and impacts, what your current understanding of how that works, and what our challenges might be with the regional school budget?
From the past experience and even watching, call it today's world, I think we've always got the difficulty where the school, in essence, is a third-party operation that is trying to operate for the two towns, but they're not directly controlled by the towns. They are a third-party independent group. And we need to work closely with them so that they understand the abilities of the town to fund them, and make sure that they too are almost take, the Finance Committee's role is to make sure that the school committee and the school itself understands the funding capability, and again, what the towns can or cannot absorb. And I think in the past, I've almost seen people try to play it off, it's the schools against the towns, but that's not a good way of doing it. We have to get it more of, the school is part of the towns, and that we all are in this together, and we shouldn't, again, either in the budget process or in the final town meetings, we want to make it so that the schools need to understand that they're part of the towns, and the towns need to understand that the schools are not a third-party entity. I think that's, in the past, what I would say we tried to avoid when we did the Blue Ribbon Commission. That's where it was the two towns together with the schools. It wasn't a separate discussion. And it went data-based. So the emotion came out of it, and we tried to do that. And I think that's an approach we really need to continue with the schools, is make sure that they're part of it, not a third-party entity, but that they understand what both towns can and cannot afford.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much. Catherine?
Yeah, I guess you may know this. I know that hasn't changed since I was on the FinCom, but during the budget development season, and the months prior to town meeting, probably February, March, the FinCom is its busiest, and the time commitment is demanding, and sometimes there are weekly meetings. Would that be a difficult time commitment for you to meet?
If you had asked me that question in the prior years, I would have said, yes, it's a problem. But again, the way that my personal situation is developing with the it's kind of a strange thing to say, is the companies that I've helped build up, we are now in the process of divesting, and I'm coming up on my early retirement plan. So this is actually a good time that I will be able to make the time commitments. And I think
Great.
that's really what I would have to say personally changed. If you asked me this question a year ago, even in the middle of COVID, I would have said, no, I've got too much going on. Because again, we were getting ready to divest all these parts of the company. But now, literally, I came from the last 2 days of meetings with the buyer. So I'm in the process of handing off my $250 million business. And we'll be doing that again with another portion of the company. So I'm kind of getting to that point where, yes, I can make that commitment.
Great, thank you.
We have, according to my watch, about 5 minutes left. Could you, you've touched on this, David, but could you, you know what? I just usurped your time, Roger. My apologies. You're next. Sorry, David. It's Roger's turn.
Well, to your point, I think we've gone through our set list of the questions, but I was curious, other than the Blue Ribbon Committee, could you speak to your experience working in groups and on committees? Obviously, the FinCom is a group of 5, and working cohesively is an important part of that. So if you could speak to your experience on that, I think we would appreciate it.
It's kind of a strange thing to say, but I'm part of a global $4 billion company. And we actually, we have my specific area, which I watch for, but I'm also part of global committees. So literally I deal with teams all the time, and we have to collaborate, work together. So I've been involved in, I call it teams for acquisitions. I've been involved in operating teams. I have my own staff that I have to manage in a team's environment. So again, it's not purely directive, because again, I've got such a large group that I have to rely on them. So I've kind of gone from anything from being an active team member to team leading. I've also, hate to say it, being part of a global corporation, I've been trained in teams leadership, teams training, the participative manager, it's a lot of corporate training to do that. But one of the approaches, because we are this large global company, are team solutions. So we've been, it's kind of funny, everybody in COVID started learning how to use Teams as an environment to meet together. I've been working with people in China and Germany and around the world in collaborative teams using electronics like this for years. So that's kind of a very outside business environment in Teams. And in the town stuff, it was mostly around the school committee, that Blue Ribbon Committee, just because I hadn't had the time to make a commitment I couldn't keep. So most of it's been business. Is that what you're asking, Roger? Is that a type
Yeah,
of?
that was helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Dave, have you had a chance to watch any of the Finance Committee meetings in the last, well, before town meeting and
Yep.
while we were
Yep.
developing?
I was watching them, not to be sarcastic, sitting here with Trudy watching them. And I understand, the basic operations and principles. I also have done some checking, and I found out that there actually is under MMA, there is actually a town finance committee group, and they actually have handbooks and stuff, so that I've already started saying that if I get on the committee, I'm going to learn the procedures and protocols. So yes, I did watch. And again, I think my takeaway, I know you're in it, but my takeaway was the town squeaked by this year. You guys did a lot of very good balancing, but it's something I personally think that we're going to get tighter and have to work together more. But I have seen the meetings, and I'm investigating now, if I become a member, what other things outside that I could also take, because I found that there are training courses for finance committee members and stuff. So
Thank you, David. Catherine, do you have any other questions, or Roger?
I don't think I have any other questions. I appreciate your time with us tonight, Dave. I think you've answered all the questions that I had. Full disclosure, I've worked with Dave before, so I do know him. So some of the questions I might have asked, I already know the answer to. So I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Catherine. Roger?
I don't have any further questions. David, I want to thank you for your time tonight.
Okay.
Dave, do you have any questions of us that you would like to put on the table before we end your interview?
Not in particular. Again, from knowing the town and, you know, Trudy's relation over the years, plus again, my background relationship with different things. I think I know what I'm walking into. And even, you know, going back where, you know, different relationships. I even think back to when I was working with Sarah Johnson, and I would actually go over the numbers and stuff when Sarah Johnson was the controller or the, you know, finance director for the town. And so, as I said, I've kind of had this not direct role, but I've been interacting with all the different town departments and even the police captain search committee and stuff. So I've always kind of kept my fingers involved, and that's what I'm looking forward to getting back to more and actually be able to dedicate some time versus before it was kind of trying to fit it in with this crazy job I have.
Thank you very
So
much,
again,
Dave.
thank you very much for your time, and
We appreciate your time. We appreciate your interest and your potential involvement in the future.
thank you much.
Thanks.
And talk to you later.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Schoenberger, is he in the waiting room, Roger?
He is not yet in the waiting room. I note that the agenda reflects that he's scheduled to start at 6:10, so we built in a
Oh.
couple minutes of
Okay.
buffer in case we
Jim,
needed it.
excuse me, Jim, he did confirm at 8:30 this morning with me his 6:10 interview for tonight. This is Jackie, sorry. He should be here. As Roger indicated, it's a little early, but he did confirm with me this morning he'd be here tonight.
Okay. At what time did you say? I missed that.
6:10 and 3 minutes.
Okay.
We were very efficient with that last interview. Our questions and we got through all our questions and he answered them all in that
Did
time.
the
So
question process feel okay to folks?
Did- I thought so.
Roger, Catherine?
Yeah.
The
I thought it
rotation?
did. Yeah.
Okay.
I just had to remember when it was my turn, you know. That's my issue. I have a little check mark.
Same here.
Well, first time we've done this, so we'll get better at it over time, right?
It's a good problem to have. You know, no one likes to have more, like to be the third applicant, you know, for 2 positions. But it is nice to have the engagement and the interest.
It is. Very good.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Schoenberger has just entered the waiting room. Do you want me to admit him or do we?
Let's open the door.
Okay.
Hello, Scott. Audio's not on yet.
There we
Hi. Good evening,
There he is.
Scott.
Evening.
Hi, Scott.
Uh,
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Scott, the process, just very briefly, will be about a 20-minute discussion. The committee is myself as chair of the Finance Committee, Catherine Harrison, chair of the Select Board, and Roger Smerridge, who is the town moderator. So we'll have a just series of a half a dozen questions or so, and we'll run through them, and then you'll have a chance at the end to ask us any particular questions that may come up as we have the discussion. So Scott, if you could start out with just talking about your background, your experiences, um, why you think that would be advantageous to the Finance Committee, and also what's piqued your interest at this point in time to submit your letter of interest.
Sure. So in terms of just general background in relation to Wenham, my wife and I moved here about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now. We have 2 daughters and a big dog. Our intention is to live in Wenham for a very long time. My personal background is I have a MBA and a master's in public policy from Georgetown University, and I have mostly worked in startup environments that have given me a lot of access. I've created a lot of budgets and under very tight circumstances, and I enjoy numbers. I enjoy working with finances. And I've also always had an interest in policy, and specifically in more local government and local town politics, where I think it's actually, you have the ability to facilitate changes much quicker than, say, in Washington, D.C., where I lived for several years and found that a little more difficult. And so, I mean, my overall background is really one that has always combined business and policy and numbers. And I think from my perspective, moving to a place and buying our first home and place where we intend to live for several decades, it's important to be part of the town and part of the process. And as it specifically relates to the Finance Committee, towns, I'm not going to say live and die, but finance is one of the most important aspects of a town and any municipality. And for me, that's where I thought I could use my skills the best, and also where I could learn the most. I think it kind of goes in both directions.
Thank you, Scott. Catherine?
Okay, Scott, can you share with us a bit about your current understanding of our town operating budget and what you perceive to be our biggest challenges, primary budget challenges going forward?
Sure. So I've watched a few of the Finance Committee meetings when I am able to, and from what I understand, the town budget is tight and seems to be continually operating based on increasing the amount of tax money it can pull out of its constituents, which can only last for such a long period of time before we're going to have some, I would say, more serious issues. I think something I've been very in favor of in relation to, I think, all of this is the master plan for the town, so that we have some way to look, say it's 5, 10, 20 years into the future, and give us a better understanding of what will our financial picture look like. From what I've gathered, it seems like, and I've only been here 2 years, but on a year to year basis, there's a lot of patching holes instead of long-term planning to gain a better understanding of what our budget will be like and what we can afford, and what the future of the town will eventually look like.
Thank you.
Roger?
So, Scott, how do you perceive the role and responsibilities of the Finance Committee operating within the overall town government structure?
Yeah, so before this call, I actually was reading the charter for the Finance Committee just to kind of make sure I had a proper understanding. And from my understanding, it appears to be advise and consent, where it's gather a lot of information, make sure there's a general understanding of the budgets in each department, and then making decisions based on that. But those decisions are put to the town. They're not binding decisions in most cases. They're advisory decisions. This is what we think the Finance Committee thinks is in the best interest of the town, and whether that goes to the Selectmen's Committee or to the town overall, it's an advisory role. Is that a fair assessment?
Okay.
I think it is, yeah.
I guess one quick follow-up on
Sure,
that
sure.
is, have you attended town meetings since moving to Wenham?
So I did not attend the last town meeting because my wife and I didn't have childcare, so my wife attended and I did not. I attended pre-COVID 2 years ago. So the one before this.
Having lived in town a few years, we have a regional school district, a regional school budget. Could you share with us a little bit about how, at least from the experience you've had so far, Scott, your understanding of the interface between the schools, the town? We have one budget, which includes obviously the schools, but what's your perception of that, and how we kind of manage that?
So I obviously don't have I will eventually have a direct interface with the schools. Right now, both of my kids are 2 and 6 months old, so neither of them are actually in school. My understanding is that it's complicated because it's not only, Wenham is an entity, but it's a Hamilton-Wenham joint school district from my understanding. And that means that contributions to the budget for the school come from 2 different places. It means that you're not only dealing with any of the policy and politics of our town, but you're also dealing with the policy and politics of Hamilton. And I'm not going to claim that I have sat and watched the school board meetings, but I have gathered from talking to other people that they can be very contentious. And there's also not always an understanding of how the school board relates to the finances in terms of other aspects of the town. So because the school board covers both towns, decisions that Wenham makes, so this came up in some of the master plan discussions, for example, where it's difficult to integrate in some of the decisions related to the school to our master plan because it's a Hamilton-Wenham school district and a Wenham master plan. And my overall assessment is it seems like it's a fairly complicated dynamic.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Catherine?
I have another question, but it has a short answer, but just a follow up to the school question. I think it's a fair assessment to say it's a complicated dynamic. And you've identified some of the complexities, but relative to the schools, do you have any sense of how Wenham as a town should approach or interface with the school district? Or how would you sort of simplify that complexity?
Like Wenham
the budget,
or the budget itself?
Yeah, the school budget. What do you think you could do to make it so that it's a simpler process, I guess is the way I want to answer the question. It's maybe a hard question, but
yeah, it's a really important question. I know that I think just based on what I've seen, and it sounds like I'm bringing up the same thing over and over, but I do think that I don't know if the school board has this, but in general, forward planning budgets are important. And in the same vein as I know there's been discussions about turf fields and potentially new schools or combining schools and kind of going in all these different directions. But all of these seem like very large decisions that in many cases get farmed out to more fractured groups as opposed to kind of coming together in one cohesive place and trying to make those decisions. And so in terms of how the budgetary committee would fit into that, I would think that's a key group that should be very, very tightly involved in the process. And instead of having different groups make different decisions, you could have a smaller group make more decisions. And I understand that probably would mean they have to be put to a town vote, but it also has the ability to expedite the actual underlying decision-making process that can be put to a vote versus getting too many voices involved, which I think can bog things down a lot of the time.
Okay, thanks. So my actual question is that the finance committee, like other committees in town, is cyclical in a sense. They do meet during the year, but the months of, say, February, March, part of January are exceedingly busy and leading up to town meeting, and also could require a pretty significant time commitment. I know sometimes the FinCom will meet on a weekly basis during those months. Is that a time commitment that you feel comfortable with? That you think you
Yeah,
could
it is.
uphold?
I actually thought it was more often than that. So that's, I thought it was like that year round. So that's actually nice to hear. And I also was aware that there are several all-day meetings on weekends, I believe, on
Mhm.
Saturdays. So yeah, that I had factored that into the equation.
Thank you.
Roger, I just want to add before you go back to you. Those meetings will probably be most likely in person as we move down the COVID infrastructure meeting process in the communities. I don't know if that'd make any difference or not for you, Scott, given your family obligations.
I don't think so. I mean, I guess it would, the only question would be is what, are we gonna vary them in time if they're in person versus online? But I mean, I don't foresee it being an issue, I guess would be
Okay.
my best answer.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Roger?
So Scott, you mentioned a minute ago, actually, in response to one of Catherine's question, cohesiveness. And my next question gets to that because, as you know, the Finance Committee is a group of 5. Cohesiveness is a very important element in achieving consensus and getting the work done. Can you speak to your experience working in groups or on committees and how you might bring that experience to bear for the FinCom?
Sure. I can definitely speak directly from experience in terms of just working in small groups and what can be tense situations. That's been most of my professional experience, I'd say. A startup environment, for example, one of my previous companies, we started out with 5 of us working in a 10 by 10 foot cubicle where we were pulling 80-hour weeks. And I can promise you, if you can get along with people in that environment, you can normally get along with people in any environment. But on a more serious note, I think my approach to working in groups like that, especially in something where, finance committee, in theory, there's no politics, like individual politics, but there obviously will always be. And it's about being respectful, and it's about approaching things, I think, with a attitude that, I'm not going to roll over an idea if I think that it is something worth pursuing, but it's all about respecting the other person and making sure you're having a conversation that's based on information and facts, as opposed to, say, pointing out a personal shortcoming. And that's how I've always approached my work environment. And I've been able to interface with a lot of different people. I work with a lot of engineers, for example. I work with a lot of members of the military, people who have very different life experiences with me and very different tech backgrounds, both technical and professional. And it's about finding common ground and making sure you can all work together. And that's something I'm very comfortable doing, and I've done a lot.
Thank you, Scott. I want to make sure I'm not repeating a question here. Strategically, you are always focused on a strategic process of problem solving. How would you, from your business to town governance, town financial structure, what would be the melding of your experience there to strategically interface with town financial problem solving and challenges?
Sure. I think that there's a first thing there, that there's to recognize a difference, that when you're working in a company, you're working for normally a for-profit entity. There's a goal at the end of the day that is to generate money, where in a town, the town's goal is in a way to generate money, but it's not to generate profit. It's to come up with a budget that will create an environment that can best service everything that is needed for the citizens of that town. And so I think that what I've learned in business is that it's important to recognize what your goals are and where scarcity is, right? So that's 2 things, right? So how do you allocate a scarce resource and how to use that scarce resource to achieve a goal? I think that if you were to take that and put it over to town government, or any form of government, it is the same thing, but you change what the goals are. My scarcity in this case, let's say it's the budget overall. What I need to do is make sure that every department within town can operate to the best of its ability, knowing that I only have so much money that can be allocated in each case. And so I think it's a matter of goal shifting, but I think the underlying idea of how you approach it is very similar.
Thanks, Scott. Catherine, do you have other follow-up?
Yeah, let's see. So you mentioned briefly, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on your experience in the business world in formulating budgets, operating budgets, and reviewing budget operations.
Oh, just
Just
yeah,
yeah, just what's your general experience?
sure. So for my last two companies, I have been in charge of doing 5-year projections, so kind of longer term budgetary planning, along with cost projections on raw material resources. So that goes into unit economics of things and understanding our manufacturing processes, understanding each step of the way, breaking it down. What is it going to cost? What could it cost? Right now, we're worried a lot about inflation. How is that going to play into all of this? So there is, kind of projecting out different scenarios of low, medium, and high inflation, and how does that affect a manufacturing contract? Going back several years now, I was in charge of developing the first day-to-day budget for our additive manufacturing company, which is really when we were moving from a 5-person operation to what would become a 20-person operation, and understanding with new funding coming in, how do we figure out the salaries for each individual person? What is our rent going to be? How do we, all the way down to utilities? So it's kind of a broad and a specific answer, but that's, really been my experience, is that it's wear a lot of hats, be comfortable with numbers, and kind of dive in.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Roger, do you have follow-up questions?
No, I think that takes care of the questions I had.
Scott, do you have any questions of the committee? As we've talked, or as you've maybe thought about prior to our meeting this evening?
Yeah, I'd be interested to know from each one of you what you think the biggest challenges the committee and the town is going to face, say, over the next 3 years or year, whatever time frame you want to put on that.
Well, I'll just go very quickly. We're approaching a mill rate of in the low 20s. We believe that'll come out somewhere in that range. Are you familiar with Proposition 2.5, Scott, as you've come into town, and how that's structured, the implications of that?
It limits the amount that you can raise the tax unless you vote on an override.
Yes, yeah. So at any rate, we have a relatively set source of revenue. The master plan, if it develops economic development opportunities, that's still down the road, I would guess several years. So our income and our revenues are predicated on 2.5 points, any new growth, any additional revenues from the state, and how the Department of Ed funds and supports transportation, special ed, and whatever grants and other revenues that the school gets to offset the town's costs. But it is, as you, I think, stated early on, it's very narrow, it's very thin. And it has been for quite a few years, but the town has had override for quite a few years, which then has pushed our mill rate to where it is now. Hamilton's, for example, is at about $18.50, $19 a thousand. So there's a little difference in the two communities in that. Catherine?
Scott, I'm always a person who has a hard time concisely stating things. I tend to go on, but I actually wrote down something that you said, because I think the biggest challenge that the town, in a sort of general sense, is what you spoke to, and that is scarce resources and how to use them best to reach a goal. And there are ways of doing that, increasing revenue, decreasing costs, but it's all a balancing act. And I think that's our biggest challenge moving forward, using scarcer and what may seem like even more scarce resources to reach a higher goal, than the year before, in terms of, we don't want to stand still. We want to provide the services, but we also like to be better, provide the best services. So to me, that's the challenge, is the scarcity of resources reaching on sort of an increasingly higher goal. So thank you for sharing that. I did write that one down. I might use it again. I'll credit you though if I do.
No, it's okay. I don't think I made it up on my own. Yeah, I will say on that, I mean, on some of those override notes and stuff, I do know that we have several friends our general age who have been looking to move to the North Shore, and they've actively wrote Wenham off their list because of how expensive it is. They look around here and they like the area very much, but in comparison to, I think, Manchester by the Sea and some of the other areas, it's significantly cheaper. And so that's something that would be, it's not a short fix. There's no like snap your fingers. There's probably no even 3-year fix to that, but there is a path you can kind of start moving on to mitigate those risks, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Roger, do you have any comments that you would like to make?
Yeah, well, and I think your last comment, Scott, feeds into what I was going to say. One of the major challenges is, and coming from the town moderator, it's not probably all that surprising, but, and it's not unique to the FinCom, it's an overall thing, but it's about messaging with the townspeople and getting them involved. There have been times where we've struggled to, or been concerned about struggling to meet quorum for town meeting, and getting that civic engagement that is necessary to get the town's business done, but also to get the townspeople to understand where the FinCom is coming from in making its recommendations. And that's, an ongoing dialogue, but it goes to that point that you were just making, Scott, of, that certain people might be looking at Wenham as a potential, place to live, but might be off put by a comparison on just the tax rate, and engaging with the citizens on understanding why that tax rate is what it is and what the town can and should be doing going forward to work on that. So I think that's a major issue for the FinCom, but also for the town as a whole.
Yeah, and I will say too, I don't think it's a problem unique to Wenham. I mean, I grew up in a small town in New York, and there's a lot of the same issues. That doesn't make it good or bad. It's just, it's kind of in a way, it's good to know problems are unique, because hopefully we can look to a lot of other places to find strategies to solve them.
Thank you very much, Scott. We have one more interview. The committee will be, after the final interview, having an open discussion of the 3 candidates. So please feel free to join that open discussion. Thank you very much for your time and for your interest. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks,
Good to
Scott.
see you.
Okay, Roger.
Should I be leaving? I should leave.
If you could just turn off your video.
You don't want to intimidate
It's an
anyone.
open meeting.
I didn't want to.
You can keep the audio on.
Okay.
Thank you. Is Kirsten Alexander in the waiting room?
She is, and we're scheduled to start with her at 6:35. So if we need to take a minute or two for any purpose, we can, but otherwise, Jim, if you give me the say so, I will let Miss Alexander in.
I'm ready to move forward. Catherine, are you?
Yeah, okay.
All right.
I'm just gonna have a glass of water.
I'm wishing I had one.
Good evening, Kirsten.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, this is Jim Purdy, Chair of the Finance Committee. The interview group is myself, Catherine Harrison, Chair of the
Hey,
Select
Kirsten.
Board, and Roger Smerridge, who is Town Moderator.
Good evening.
So the process tonight is relatively brief, actually. It's about 20 minutes. And we have a series of questions, then we'll do a little round robin of the questions and leave an opportunity for you to ask the committee some questions towards the end as we try to put this all together. There are 2 open slots, as I believe you are aware, and 3 candidates. So it's nice to have people of skills and interests and abilities of the 3 candidates, and we appreciate your interest. So Kirsten, why don't we start out with, tell us a little bit about your general background, living in town, your professional background, and how that could positively bring positive experiences to the committee, and why at this point are you what piqued your interest in the finance committee?
Yep. Well, I'm actually start with the last part, which is that I attended the January 9th meeting, which was the epic 6 to 8 hour long meeting where all the department chairs come and talk about the budget and what they're thinking about. And I found it completely fascinating. I did take a nap midway through, which I know everyone on the committee didn't get to do, but being able to watch it from home was really interesting to me, because I always wondered, where does the money from our taxes and fees go to? And that really answered it for me. And it, obviously there was a whole process afterwards, and I was just really intrigued. My background is I started out in the high tech world in the early days of the web, working for startups, usually as the only woman on the executive team, running either marketing or editorial. I have an MFA in creative writing. I have overseen a whole bunch of MBAs, but I don't have one. I also worked at Harvard Business School in the entrepreneurship group. And I have on and off run my own marketing consulting business over the years, particularly helping smaller nonprofits stretch their budgets as best they can by using new technology and other things that sometimes they don't know about, because they don't have a big staff, they don't have access to some of the latest technologies. So I started out living in Hamilton part-time in 2006, and then moved up to the area in 2011 and to Wenham all the way to Wenham in 2015. Since then, I realized where we are is a bit isolated, and if I was going to meet anyone, I had to start joining things. So I joined the 375th committee, where I was vice chair. I joined the Cultural Council, which opened up a whole world of giving out grants to local nonprofits, and then we were really intent on going to see those performances and other things. So that was a great exposure to what's going on around town. I also joined the Wenham Village Improvement Society board, which I am on currently as a development chair, and helped start the Hamilton Wenham Human Rights Coalition. I'm the Democratic Town Committee chair for Wenham because nobody ran for the Democratic Town Committee, and my husband wrote me in, and Diane Bucco reached out and said, "Are you interested in doing it?" So here I am. And I would just say that I'm a joiner, and I know a lot of people around town, and I'm really passionate about Wenham in general and helping it to succeed into the future. I forgot I'm also on the Garden Club board, coming off of 2 years as program co-chair. So I've been deeply involved in the community, and I've heard a lot. One of my consulting projects this last year was helping the town of Hamilton with the town hall project, trying to get an override for that. And I learned a lot about the budget process, the misinformation that's out there, the misunderstandings that happen around budgets and town funding, and all the very strange, peculiar things that happen in a municipal setting versus a business setting. I hope that answers it.
Thank you, Kirsten. Catherine?
Hi, Kirsten, how are you?
Great.
Could you share with us your current understanding of Wenham's town operating budget and what you perceive to be our biggest primary budget challenges at the moment?
Yep, actually, I have a copy of the budget here, the overview. Anyway, I didn't print out the whole thing. I think, and I, have been attending various meetings over the year and town meeting, obviously. Um, I think we do a good job with our budget. We're not extravagant in any way, but costs go up every year. Like insurance goes up, and people need raises, and all of the basic things that happen that are inevitable. And that trajectory isn't going to change unless we do some more radical, not even radical, but like thoughtful things, I guess. So, for example, the joint inspectional services that's just happened this current year. So I know a lot of people think that merging Hamilton and Wenham is the panacea that will save us from everything. But actually, both towns have been really smart about doing things collaboratively to cut costs. And that's a big cost savings this year that was particularly notable to me in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Roger?
Kirsten, how do you perceive the role and responsibilities of the Finance Committee as it operates within the overall town government structure?
Yeah, so I think it has a huge amount of responsibility, probably second only to the Board of Selectmen. I'm sorry, Select Board.
I might argue with you about the FinCom, that they may have more responsibility.
Maybe more, but so I mean, everything runs through the budget, right? It doesn't happen if there isn't money assigned to it. So I think the role as an individual member of the committee is to represent the town's interest and the voters' interest, the residents' interest, but not your own self-interest. I think that's really important. I would say I'm a practical finance person. I'm going to look to save where I can, but I'm not looking to slash taxes. In a way that we can't run the town. I think we are a well-run town, and that's part of the appeal of the town. So it's a balancing act, and people are going to have differences of opinions. I think it's really important to be collegial with everyone. And I've been on a lot of boards that have had tough years and good years. And, in the good years, you try to save for the tougher years, which you never know what's coming down the pike. I've been the finance chair when we had to lay off almost an entire staff of a nonprofit during the last recession. And, you also need to do it in a really humane way. So I guess that's how I see the role.
Kirsten, as you know, we're a regional school district,
Yeah.
obviously. Could you tell us your current understanding of the school budget and its interface with our town budget, and how that impacts and works and challenges us and challenges the schools?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a hard thing for a lot of people to get their heads around. And I probably didn't know as much a year ago as I do now about the budget. For example, I didn't really understand that the regional school system is a separate municipal entity. So that's why it has its own board, it comes up with its own budget, and we as a town basically are saying yes or no on that budget. And this year, a lot of people were really pushing to say no, as is their right. And that was I think a really interesting thing to observe, because a lot of people didn't really understand the process. So it's hard to make change if you don't understand the process. So a lot of what I did this year, not just for the town hall project, but for other things, was to explain the process to other people as best as I could, or point them in the right direction, because people were spending a lot of effort and energy trying to change something that really they were doing it at the wrong time, like maybe 8 months too late. So there's that. The other part of it is just that the schools are the majority of our budget. So, you know, I think that both towns did a really good job this year of reaching out to the school committee and the superintendent and trying to make sure that there was not a huge override, which would likely fail this year because of just COVID and the general economic situation that we're in, and also prior years of pretty large increases. So, you know, I think that collaboration was a really positive one this year because it meant that the increases were lower or flat.
Fortunately, we didn't have an override this year.
Right, right.
Prior year, we had a significant override, but this year we
Yeah,
were
yeah.
able to keep it within the levy limit, which was positive.
Challenge.
Just a quick follow-up. What would be your sense of a future override? How would you kind of approach that and think about it if we were in that situation?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to be looking several years out at what are the likely things coming down the pike that could cause an override. The school building projects are top of that list, and also the turf field project, which would need to be jointly funded by both Hamilton and Wenham if it were happening. And I know that that is being tracked to some degree, but the schools in particular, you know, there seems to be a big appetite for redoing every single school. And I don't think people have any idea that that could cost tens of millions of dollars and what the impact would be on our taxes. So even now, like doing the education around those projects, I think is really important. If there are other things that, you know, aren't on my radar, I think it would be good to just get them out there so people know and can discuss them. And that's really where the master plan process comes in. You know, the budget is a reflection of your values. And if the master plan is leading us in a different direction than our budget, then that's probably where we need to redirect the town. And that's a collaborative effort by, you know, led by a consulting firm that's experienced in this. So I look forward to that.
Thank you, Kristen. Catherine, do you follow?
Yeah, just the next question having to do with time commitment. So during the well, let me back up because I think this is a better way to ask the question. I'm improving on my question over time. So the Finance Committee meets periodically throughout the year.
Yep.
But it has its busiest season leading up to the town meeting, starting January and then February, and then really maybe peaking in March, where in parts of February and March could be weekly meetings of the Finance Committee. Would that be a difficult commitment for you to meet time-wise?
No, I'm coming off of the two most time-consuming boards right now. As of July 1st, I'll be off of those. And I'm not on any other town committees right now. So that was done deliberately so that I would have the time. And the summer, I gather, is the quieter time typically for the Finance Committee. And that works well for me. So yeah, January to March is usually a quieter time of the year for me anyway.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm a consultant. I work from home. I have flexibility in my schedule. Yeah.
Great.
And I mentioned this to the other candidates that we will be moving towards in-person meetings at some point, probably in the fall, when we begin to have some introductory meetings with the finance staff at town hall, and then moving towards that all-day meeting, which you referenced in early January.
Yep.
Yeah, 2 years ago, I think we had it in December, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
We kind of move up to that, and then we continue to work on each individual department and with the school system. So
yep.
It does get quite busy at that point. Roger. Yeah.
Kirsten, you obviously have an abundance of experience on boards and committees, particularly within the town setting. But I was wondering if you could speak both generally to your approach working in that group setting, and also how you would bring that experience to positively benefit the FinCom, which is a 5-member group that needs to work cohesively to reach consensus.
Yep. So I've been on board since I was 16. Actually, I was on the Massachusetts Junior Classical League board, eventually as the president. So I've kind of seen it all. I've seen good board dynamics and weaker board dynamics. I've seen people arguing. I like a collegial group, and I like to follow protocols. Like I was on the board of the Dorchester Arts Collaborative when I lived in Boston, and after the meeting when I was being voted in, they were like, "Okay, congratulations." It's like, we didn't actually vote. Can we like vote me in officially? So I'm legally on this board. And they're like, "Oh, okay, that's why we have you here." So in particular, the Junior League board experience has been great for me. I think it's the best organized board I've ever been on. The minutes are fantastic. The board book is like 40 pages all put together well in advance. It's run very efficiently. When I run a meeting, I run it efficiently so that we're done on time, unless there's some major thing going on. I'm picky about things being in the minutes or not being in the minutes. It shouldn't be in the minutes. Like discussion really should not be in minutes. So I've lent that experience to a lot of the boards that I've been on. I've taken some junior league trainings about, how a board should operate, and brought that directly to another board the next day that was kind of not working out so great. But all of the committees that I've been in and observed in Wenham have been pretty decorous, and it helps having someone like Catherine Tinsley taking your notes.
Amen to that.
Has a history with the town, and knows, 2 years ago we did X, Y, and Z. You might want to look at that. I think the staff at Town Hall is also like incredible and has a wealth of knowledge. I was so impressed with Jackie Bresnahan during that long budget meeting. So yeah.
And just one follow-up on that. You mentioned earlier that you served as finance chair of one of the nonprofit boards that you were on.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that experience was like?
Yeah, that was actually for our church in Dorchester. It's the oldest congregation in Boston. It was founded in 1630, and was a struggling congregation that people thought was closed. And I joined with several friends to help turn it around as an organization. We felt it was important that it survive. It had major building issues, like the steeple was going to fall through the sanctuary. So we had to take it down, and we found ways to get it renovated that cost us very little. We had a fortune of silver at the MFA, decided to sell that and put it into a larger endowment so that we could be more self-sustaining. And the finance chair role I took on my last year on a 3-year board term, where I had been vice chair of the board. And everyone but the minister got laid off that year. So we were all able to relate very much to the people we had to lay off. And we were also able to volunteer to fill in some of the gaps and turn it into an opportunity as well, where people felt more ownership of the organization rather than relying on paid staff to do everything. So that was, and because I was coming off the board and not going back on, I was in a very kind of protected situation, I guess. I could use the knowledge that I had, but also the fact that I was not trying to run for anything new as a political benefit, I would say, in that role. I also served on the finance committee at the Junior League, which then went into a major building renovation, about $1 million renovation. At the church, I also served on the renovation committee, and we did do a massive renovation of the building. And it's in great shape now. So
I remember, Kirsten, about reading the challenges of your church, particularly around the very difficult decision to sell the pewter. Was it pewter or
Silver, sterling,
silver?
yeah,
Paul
colonial silver.
Paul Revere forged silver, is that right? I mean, I remember,
I think it was Paul Revere Jr. Yeah, there was some.
but I
Most of
remember-
it was on display at the MFA. I remember going there once, and it was all there. But you know, it wasn't doing us a lot of good, and in terms of growing the congregation or our values. So so ultimately, it was a unanimous vote by the congregation to sell it.
difficult decisions, though.
Yep.
Very difficult.
Yep.
Okay, do you have questions of the committee, Catherine or Roger or myself?
Well, Jim, you've been running the committee for a few years, so I guess in terms of how you approach things, generally, you know, that would be helpful.
Generally, I don't have all the answers. In fact, as I move along in life, it's kind of that realization that the longer you live, the less you know, kind of thing. Hang on. I'm inclusive. I try to pull in everyone's opinion. We discuss issues openly, with respect for each other, with decency, and respect for the staff. We work very closely with the staff, and the staff, they support us. I mean, they run the numbers. They put on the table in front of us the spreadsheets.
Yep.
And all the department heads. So my approach to this, and every chair is a little different, I believe, is to gather information, to work with the committee members, to hear everyone out with respect, and then put it to a vote. If it requires a vote to approve or make a favorable recommendation to the town for the actual articles. So basically, that's how I've tried to my best to operate the committee.
I think one thing that I could bring that maybe other people wouldn't is a marketing perspective and being able to explain really complicated things in a way that people who aren't, you know, deep in the weeds will understand. And also there were 2 typos in this document, which would not be there if I were on the committee. So, your copy
Just
editor.
2, huh?
Well,
Just 2.
2 in the words. I don't know about the numbers, but often typos do hide in the numbers and graphs and things. That's what I've found.
Was that in our summary overview by chance?
It was like
Oh.
cherry sheet receipts, I think is probably cherry street receipts.
No, it's actually
Cherry
cherry sheet.
It
Cherry
is cherry
sheet.
sheet. Okay, well, I don't know what that is.
Cherry sheets. That developed as a color of the paper that the state used to give the cities and towns the amount of money that they'd be receiving for the upcoming fiscal year, and it kind of stayed there over the last 40 years or so.
Okay, well, I stand corrected. 1 typo then.
Thank you, Kirsten. We appreciate very much your interest
Thank you.
and the time that you've taken this evening and sharing with us your background, experiences, and what you would bring to the committee. The committee is going to now convene. It's going to be open, and we're going to discuss the 3 candidates. We may or may not make a decision this evening on the 2 out of the 3, or we may, but we are going to try to take a stab at it. But thanks again. We really appreciate your time and your and what you've and also your contributions that you've already made to the community. That's very nice.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, Kirsten.
I will mute myself then.
We have 3 very strong candidates, from my view.
Agreed.
All with
Agreed.
different skills and approaches and abilities and backgrounds. And what I've been, as I've been, I'll just share my observations. I don't know if I've made decisions yet. Is that each of these candidates would bring unique kind of skills to the committee and to the town. What I'm trying to do is say, what's the best fit for the town at this point in time with the committee, and what the future of the committee in terms of future openings, and what will we need down the road in a year or whatever. How does that kind of play out? But what do we need now? How does it work? Given people's skills, responsibilities, and available energies and time. That's kind of how I'm beginning to try to put this together.
Mhm. Roger, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I
Correspondence?
think that is the absolute right approach. We have, as you say, Jim, 3 very strong prospects for 2 positions. Just by operation of the procedure, one of them is going to be on the outside looking in. Whomever that ends up being, I would strongly suggest that they continue to explore other ways of being involved in the town. There are any number of committees and boards that have openings and could use the skills that each of these 3 candidates are bringing before us tonight. So I think with that in mind, trying to figure out who the best 2 for the FinCom as we look at FY22, and then obviously the 2 subsequent years after it, is the critical need here. And that's sort of where I'm coming at from this.
I think I'm really in line. It's going to be a difficult decision because I do agree that all 3 candidates bring something different. And I do think it's going to come down to fit in terms of what skills. Jim, you probably know this best, but I've certainly watched a few meetings myself. What skills are we going to need in the next couple of years? And I think a little bit of what are we, I don't want to say that we're losing, but the skills that the people who have just are leaving had, and is there anything in that particular skill set that we feel important to make sure we backfill? I think all 3 of these people could do the job and could bring their own personality to it. It's just a matter of, and I do agree, Roger, not only for the future, but even right now, the 3rd person, whoever that person may be, who is not one of the 2 that's chosen in this process, there are presently openings on boards and committees that we're trying to fill for this coming year. So it's not even so much only a future thing, but I would definitely encourage anyone to look at everything. And if this isn't the one, to try to see if there's something else. And certainly we all could help, I think, that person find another place.
Yeah, that is exactly what I meant, Catherine. I didn't mean to imply that the person should, sit and wait. There is
no
opportunity to jump right in elsewhere.
I guess I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no
I
worries.
knew what you meant. I think I'm a
You
little
vocalized it better than I did.
Well, we're like right in appointment season, and we keep getting updates on, boards and committees, and I'm just at the moment very aware of the fact that there are at least a couple that we do not have enough people to fill the committee. So that was what was bubbling up in my mind at the moment. So yeah, and there'll be some next year and the year after, et cetera, et cetera.
I was just going to add to that, Catherine, or consideration for the Finance Committee in the future.
Yeah.
Which is just David rolls off a year from now. So, this is a rolling,
right?
A rolling committee membership. That
yeah.
Can
and the FinCom. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Could
reapply, raise their hands, and certainly be considered once again in the future. I mean,
Yeah. And the FinCom is unique in that there really are term limits. So
Right.
there are, by default, always going to be openings. Some of our committees and boards are no term limits. Someone could sit on them for years and years.
Right.
But the FinCom, and I kind of a proponent of term limits, I think it's been a good thing. 6 years serving, and then someone else rotates in. I think that's does provide opportunities for people always, not,
Yeah.
oh, well, maybe there'll be an opportunity. So I agree, Jim, you're right on that.
And to that point, Catherine, it also, strongly counsels in favor of identifying people in advance that may be looking to participate in that process because of the term limits. It's you are limited in how the current committee, can play a part in the future, and so identifying those prospects, for lack of a better term, is important.
Yeah, agree.
So, one of the suggestions you had the other night, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, gosh, was a straw vote process. I don't know whether this committee is ready to have a straw vote this evening. Do you want to consider, are there other, would we want to re-interview any of the candidates? I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. Or think about it, or would you like to try to proceed with a straw vote as such and come to some consensus? That's the first question.
I don't think for my part that I would need to, we would need to interview the candidates. I think actually the questions were good, the answers were good. I don't think more information from the candidates would help me personally. It's the harder part is deciding. It's harder than I even thought it would be, even knowing the candidates in advance, which direction to go in. But I think we've heard enough. I think I understand enough about them to ultimately make a decision.
I threw that out there just as an
No,
option. I agree.
it's a good point.
I need any more information. That wouldn't help me make the decision.
Right. No, it's a good thing because sometimes you think, oh gosh, there's only one more. I wish I had asked
Just
that.
one more question.
But in this case, I agree with you, Jim. I feel like I might have too much information that's making it harder
Yeah,
to,
I know. Roger?
I also agree. I don't think further interview would facilitate our process. I thought the answers tonight were very, very well thought, and each of the candidates, displayed a good understanding of what the committee needs and how it operates. So I don't think more information is the issue here. In terms of timing, Jim, I know when we did meet, you had expressed some desire to have appointments made before July 1st. If that is still something that you think is important to the committee, I think I could be prepared to at least participate in a straw vote this evening and see whether it required further discussion among the three of us.
Yeah, I think I'm getting to the July start. I think it would be important to have our lineup, if you will, ready to go July 1, and then have the second or the fourth week. I was talking with Jamie Colon, the finance director, about her schedule of having a meeting with the new committee for the reorganization of the committee, chair, vice chair, and so on. So I'd like to have that in place in July, just in case we have a need to meet in August, or part of September. I'd like to have the committee at least moving forward and structured. I'm gonna propose my thoughts of a straw vote. And it's been very, very difficult. The candidates are all very strong. but I've been thinking about this year and I'm thinking about a year from now as well of what we may need. But I guess the way to do it is to go first, second, and third. Does that sound to make sense in terms of priorities?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if we're doing literally a straw vote, maybe each of us talking about who we might be our top
Right.
choice. Is that what you're saying?
Top and second choice. It's kind of like ranked choice.
Please don't confuse me.
Not as
Find that so
complicated as that, but
Well, my difficulty and why I'm struggling a little right now is I think it's for me anyway. I have what I think would be the top choice. The second and third choices for me are so close that it's almost
yeah.
harder to do that.
Yeah.
But I leave it to you guys to whatever process you'd like to use.
And so I'll say this, I think in my mind, deliberating, having reviewed the materials we were provided and hearing the candidates speak tonight and deliberating a bit as we've been talking, as strong as I think all three of the candidates are, in my mind, there are two that I think fit the needs of the committee for this year the best. And certainly the third may fit the needs of this committee in the future, and certainly can offer strong contributions to other town committees this year. But I would actually have a harder time differentiating between my 1 and 2 than a
2 and
third,
3.
I think.
I'm gonna jump in.
Okay.
If that is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're very brave. Good for you.
Well,
True leadership.
And I think Catherine and I both appreciate you
We have to start
taking the lead a
some-
little bit here, Jim.
And yeah, and you have
Okay.
the most skin
You-
in the game. Let's put it that way.
My number one candidate would be Mr. Schoenberger, and what he brings to the committee. My number 2 candidate would be Mr. Reed. And it's a very close between Mr. Reed and Kirsten Alexander. But I think for the coming year, those are the 2 individuals that I think would make a contribution to the committee.
Well, Jim, since we have the same top 2, I guess I'll go next. Although I would have to, my number 1 candidate, I think, would be Mr. Reed, with Mr. Schoenberger being 2. But at least that is the same top 2. No criticism of the third candidate. Certainly,
Right.
Kirsten is
Right.
extremely valuable. But I
Yeah.
think looking at next year, I agree with you
Yeah.
on the needs of the committee.
Roger?
So I will say, just for the record, I did not have the same top 2, but given the way Jim and Catherine have expressed their views, I'm not going to throw a monkey wrench in here, and the way we vote would be the way it is anyway. I think Scott and David would be very, very strong members of the Finance Committee. I also thought Kirsten would be a very strong member of the committee, would bring a slightly different perspective than maybe the committee previously had, as well as a ton of experience with boards and committees in both Wenham and elsewhere. So I think, given the way the discussion is going, I don't think I need to say any more. And I just want to say that all 3 candidates were outstanding, and we are lucky as a town to have each of them expressing interest. And I would, as I have said, I think now, strongly urge the third candidate to continue in that mold, and certainly, to Jim's point, submit a letter of interest for the seat that's coming up next year on the committee.
I would agree with that as well, Roger. And encourage that process.
Mhm. Definitely true.
So given that, Jim, do you want me to make a motion for a nomination?
Yes, if you.
Or actually, no, strike that. Do you want me to put the names into nomination?
Yes,
So I will nominate Scott Schoenberger and David Reed in no particular order to be appointed as members of the Finance Advisory Committee for a 3-year term commencing on July 1st, 2021.
thank you.
And I'll second that motion.
Excuse me, that should be a 5-year term?
5-year? Is it a
There's
No,
no
it's
5-year
three.
term?
No,
full
it's
5-year term, Catherine.
Oh, okay, it's 3? Yeah,
Three in the
Three.
bylaw.
okay, thank you,
It's 2 3-years or 3 and then 3. So it's a 3-year
Okay.
term.
thank you.
You're welcome. A motion's been made and by Mr. Smearage, seconded by Ms. Harrison. Any further discussion by myself or the appointing committee?
I think.
Hearing
we're all-
none, all those in favor of the motion as made by Mr. Smearage? Aye, Jim?
Aye, Catherine.
and I, Roger.
Thank you very much, committee. This is,
You.
I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of the committee, and I appreciate very much the time and energy that all the applicants have put forth, and now 2 who will, Mr. Reed and Mr. Schoenberger, who will now join the committee. And I want to commend Ms. Alexander for her current deep involvement in the community and encourage her to consider the Finance Committee in the future.
Yeah.
Ms. Alexander has a wonderful background in nonprofits, financing, and so on.
Definitely
And I
true.
respect that.
And Jim, I'm excited for you. You never really know what is going to end up when you have 2 people that have been on the committee for a while. But I think, as we've said, all 3 were great. I think David and Scott will also be great additions to what is an amazing FinCom that you have, that we have in town right now. They're interesting because they're both have experience and knowledge, but it's they complement each other in some ways. So I think that will be good on the FinCom as well.
I agree. And I think all 3 would make a fit with the FinCom, if you will, in terms of
Absolutely.
style, approach, consideration, give and take in a respectful
Yeah.
process. So
Which on our
Thank
FinCom is extraordinary. We've all sat on boards and committees, and I think our FinCom is extraordinary in its approach, collegiality, respect, and certainly as chair, you and Alex before you have fostered that. So it's great.
we're too small.
Forward to another exciting year.
We're too small a community to be at each other's throats in a dysfunctional way.
Because your
And the
neighbors after you
and the
leave the
decisions
committee.
don't get any easier.
No, they don't.
Jackie?
Just from a process perspective, if all 3 of you can come by sometime next week to sign certificates of appointment, please. I'll have those ready by probably
Can I,
sometime
can I
tomorrow.
do that tomorrow by chance? I'm going to be away most of next week.
I'll do them tonight before I go, Jim, and I'll leave them out in case Jamie will be here tomorrow too. I think you have to come in and sign some stuff for her.
Okay.
So I'll leave them out for you.
I'll be in fairly early. What time do you open? 9?
9.
Okay, I'll be in at 9 tomorrow because I have a 10 o'clock commitment. And
Okay,
sign those.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have we completed our business for this evening?
Feels like it. I'm exhausted.
I believe
That's a lot of
so.
thinking.
We do not appear to need a next meeting, so we can cruise past number 7 on the agenda.
Right.
Okay,
Although we will need to approve the minutes of this meeting. So,
Oh, that's true. So you're
There'll
right,
be a-
Catherine. We do technically need a next meeting.
yeah, but it's, a pretty quick one. I just sometimes, having been on this appointing committee before, I've been the next year. Oh, gosh, there was that second set of minutes. What the heck did they do? So I
Yeah.
just wanted to, remind folks that
we'll
we
get
will
those
have
minutes
those
out, and then
minutes.
we'll have a brief 15-minute public meeting to approve the minutes, or possibly any other business that may come up that's appropriate for this appointing committee.
Great.
Sounds good.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of adjournment? Aye, Jim?
Aye, Catherine.
And I, Roger.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
This has
your input
been really
and
an
your-
interesting process.